8 generals who never lose. What if I told you that throughout the history of mankind, in the span of time, over 5,000 years of recorded warfare, only 8 military commanders who made it to the impossible. All 8 of these men led troops in hundreds of battles, faced an unusually heavy obstacle, commanded in foreign lands, and fought a war against military strategists, the greatest of his time, but never, not even once, they taste the bitterness of defeat. While Alexander Grant conquered most of the world, which was known before the age of 30, he has never lost a single battle throughout his military career. When Khalid ibn Walid won the title, Saif al-Olive, the Sword of God, not just a poem, but actual evidence. His perfect record throughout the Arabian Peninsula and beyond, Mongol General Subutai set up the largest land empire in human history, destroyed the Knights of Europe, Chinese dynastic dynasty, and Middle Eastern powers with excellence. Tactics that modern military academies are still learning. To this day, Dayong Ike, revolutionary Bohemia, one-eyed, created such an effective tactic of war until his enemies tremble. Just hear his name called. But here's which makes their story even more remarkable. They are not the ones who avoid tough battle or pick an easy opponent. They actively seek conflict, most challenging in its day. They face the same team twice, even 3 times as big of their own strength. They fought in enemy territory during the harsh winter, across the treacherous terrain, and fought enemies who knew they were coming. Yet somehow through combination of genius, tactics of war, psychological and pure willpower, they change every loss, be the victory. Today we're going to greet the minds and methods of these 8 legendary commanders. We will uncover the secret behind a winning record, unbreakable they, checking out battles, which is supposed to destroy them, and discovering how their innovations changed the face of war forever. From the Arabian desert to the Mongolian steppe, from ancient Macedonia to medieval Bohemia, these are the stories of the 8 generals, the only in human history who have never known defeat. 1. Khalid ibn Walid, the Sword of God drawn. Imagine this. Year 636 AD, and the most powerful empire on earth would face his greatest humiliation. Imperium Byzantium, heir to Rome's military heritage, has assembled the largest army in its history. More than 100,000 experienced soldiers, the best cavalry, and tested generals who have never known defeat. Face off with them is a force that is almost half of their number, led by a man called an Arab, Saif al-Olive, the Sword of God drawn. His name is Khalid ibn al-Walid, and he would have orchestrated one of the tactical most brilliant in military history. But this is what makes this moment even more incredible. Khalid did not start out as a Muslim fighter. Only 14 years before, he fought against the people he now leads, served as a cavalry commander for the Mecca team that seeks to destroy the Muslim community. Early on the Battle of Uhud, year 625 AD, Khalid cavalry attack, who nearly destroyed the Muslim army and nearly killed the Prophet Muhammad himself. The irony is so shocking. Man who was ever closest to ending Islam will be his greatest military champion. When Khalid converted to Islam in 629 AD, Prophet Muhammad is reported to have said, "Now the Sword of God is drawn for the believers." And how sharp the blade proved to be. Since joining the Muslim forces, Khalid has never lost a single battle. On 3 different battlefields, he destroyed the Rida War, unifying the Arabian Peninsula under Islamic rule. He conquered Iraq, defeated the Sasanian Empire, the mighty, in a series of lightning campaigns. And now, in Yarmouk, he would have dealt a killing blow to the power of Byzantium Delavan. The Battle of Yarmouk is not just another victory, it's a masterclass in tactical innovation. While the Byzantines, expecting a traditional frontal assault, Khalid had something completely different. In his mind, he put his troops in a defensive formation, intentionally seem weaker than the actual. Then, As the Byzantine forces committed themselves to their
Khalid
offensive, carried out what is called a military historian. As one of the maneuvers, the greatest flanking unit ever conceptualized cavalry. His car moves like a ghost across the desert, besieged the entire power of Byzantium. In one day, the Eastern Roman Empire lost, not just a battle, but his whole presence. In Levin, more than 40,000 Byzantine soldiers were killed. Khalid's temporary loss, only hundreds of people, which made Khalid absolutely unstoppable. Not just his tactical brilliance, but his revolutionary approach against the war itself. He pioneered the use of mounted archers in the Battle of the Desert, created the first mobile army, which is really in Arab history, and developed psychological warfare tactics that terrifies the enemies before the fighting started. His famous double maneuver in Yarmouk into a template for military academies around the world, studied by generals from Napoleon to Rommel. But probably the most incredible, Khalid achieved all this while maintaining the loyalty and morale of his troops through several campaigns. Harshest in military history, when Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab eventually dismissed Khalid from commanding, it's not because of any failure. It was because Umar was afraid that people would start worshipping Khalid over Halalar. Khalid ibn Walid died peacefully in his bed in 630 AD, never tasted defeat. In over 100 battles, his last words were reported: "I have fought so many battles, looking for martyrs, so that there is no place on my body without wounds from the spear, sword, or arrow. But here, I die in bed like a camel. May the cowardly eyes never sleep." To great Alexander, child who conquered the world. Imagine being only 20 years old and inherit a kingdom on the brink of destruction, surrounded by enemies who see your youth as a weakness. Now imagine that in the next 13 years, you will conquer more territory than any human in history, created an empire stretching from Greece to India, and never lost a single battle. This is the impossible story of Alexander from Macedonia, who is known in history as Alexander the Great. But this is what makes the story of Alexander the more incredible. He shouldn't have been a king at all. His father Philip, too from Macedonia, have turned Macedonia from a remote kingdom into a military power. But Alexander is just one of several potential heirs. Everything changed in 336 BC. When Philip was murdered at his daughter's wedding, stabbed to death by his own bodyguard in front of the entire nobility. Macedonia at the age of 20, Alexander faces a direct challenge that would destroy most of the country's rulers. Greek cities, led by Tips, immediately revolted, saw the young king as an easy target. The northern barbarian tribe, kissing weakness, and started invading Macedonian territory, even within his own castle. There is a whisper, conspiracies and plots against his rule. But Alexander's response was swift and devastating. In his first campaign, he marched north and destroyed the Shresian tribes and Illyria, so perfect that they never threatened Macedonia again. When news reached him that Tips has declared independence and assembled Greek cities, others to rebel, reaction of the legendary Alexander. He forced his troops to march 300 miles in just 13 days, appear in front of the wall. Tips like lightning. Tips people don't believe their eyes. How the Macedonian troops could travel that far so fast. Alexander's siege of Tips lasted only 2 weeks, but the consequences sent shockwaves throughout the ancient world. Not only did he beat that city, he removed it from existence. Every building was demolished, every citizen sold as slaves, and the land itself was plowed with salt, so it will never grow anything else there. Only one house was saved, home of the poet Pindar, because Alexander respected learning and culture, even in his anger. The message is clear. This is not Philip's son playing around being king. This was a whole new kind of ruler. With Greece secured, Alexander turned his attention to the impossible dream, whose father died after him. Conquest of the Persian Empire. Persian people control the greatest empire the world has ever seen. Stretches from Turkey to Afghanistan, with unlimited wealth and troops numbering hundreds of thousands. Against these giants, Alexander could muster maybe 35,000 people. The chances are so overwhelming, so that his own general begged him to reconsider. But Alexander had studied under Aristotle, and he understands something the enemy doesn't. His enemy's the war was not won just by numbers, but by the speed, surprise, and readiness. Take risks. Who was considered insane by others. His first big test came in the Granicus River in 334 BC, where Persian troops, waiting in the perfect defensive position, any rational commander will look for different crossing points or wait for reinforcements. Alexander did the opposite. He led a cavalry charge directly to the strongest point of the Persian line. Military madness, but it works. Persian people, expecting a cautious approach, psychologically crushed by the bravery of Alexander. In a few hours, their entire team is on the run. But Granicus is just the beginning in Issus. In 333 BC, Alexander took on the third Darius himself, king of kings, with an army 3 times bigger than his. The battle was supposed to be a massacre against the Macedonian. Instead, Alexander's tactical genius turned it into the biggest shock in ancient warfare. Using the field to neutralize Persian numerical superiority, Alexander personally led the cavalry charge that breached the Persian center and sent from use running away. In a panic, sight of the king of gods, they run, save lives, destroying Persian morale throughout the empire. But Alexander's masterpiece came in Gaugamela in 331 BC, where Darius assembled the largest army in Persian history. More than 250,000 people, including war elephants, sickle car, and elite units from around the world known. This time there's nowhere to run, no Maidan advantage to exploit. It's gonna be pure tactical genius against an incredible number. Alexander revolutionary solution. Instead of trying to match the Persian line, he created formation that can bend without breaking, absorbed the Persian attack, while simultaneously launched a counterattack, which destroys. Result was the total annihilation of Persian power and capture the richest empire on earth. Alexander the Great died in the Babylon in 323 BC. At the age of only 32, never lost a battle in his entire career. His empire stretched from Egypt to India, covers more than 2 million square miles, and encompasses dozens of different cultures and nations. But perhaps his greatest achievement, not military, it's culture. Alexander's vision of a unified world, where the Greek civilization, Persian Egypt, and India can blend, created a Hellenistic period, one of the most creative and innovative in human history. Tiga Essebutai, Daling Mangal. In the winter of 1241, Europe gripped by terror that he had never experienced before. From the frozen plains of Poland to the mountains of Hungary, force more devastating than natural disasters. Anything is sweeping the continent, leaving nothing but ash and silence. This is not a troop in the traditional sense. This is a perfectly coordinated war machine, which moves faster than the news, being able to travel, strike with surgical precision, and disappears like smoke before any defense could be put in place, leading an unstoppable force. This was a guy whose name would be synonymous with military genius, the greatest general in Mongol history, and maybe the most brilliant tactical mind that the world has seen. But here's who made the story of Subutai absolutely incredible. He was not born into nobility or trained in an elite military academy. He was the son of a blacksmith of a Mongol tribe. Small a man that rises through pure merit to become the architect of the land empire, the greatest continuity in human history. When Subutai first time joined the prestige army as a young fighter, Imperium Mongol, just a group of tribes fighting in the steppe Mongolia at the time of his death. That empire stretched from Korea to Poland, from Siberia to Vietnam, covers more than 24 million, and covers almost a quarter of the world's total land. And Subutai personally led a campaign that conquered most of his. That makes Subutai different of every other general in his day. Not just his tactical brilliance, but his revolutionary understanding about the war itself. While European knights Still think, when it comes to individual combat and honorary duels, Subutai arranged campaigns on several continents simultaneously. He pioneered the concept of total war. Not only did he defeat the enemy forces, but systematically destroying their abilities to fight through psychological warfare, economic disruption, and the complete destruction of military infrastructure. Intelligence network is so sophisticated until he often know more about movement, enemy forces, than the enemy commander himself. Subutai masterpiece came during the 1241 European campaign, when he accomplished something that was still fighting military historians to understand him simultaneously, led to separate armies that operate over 500 miles apart, coordinate their movements with such precision so that they converge on their target. In a few days, each other's northern forces, under his direct command, destroyed the combined power of Poland in the Battle of Mohi, while its southern powers annihilated Hungarian troops at the Battle of the Sajo River. Second, the battle took place in 1 o'clock. Each other demonstrate a level of strategic coordination that will no longer be seen until the age of radio communication. But the true genius of the European campaign, Subutai, is not just a military victory. It was the psychological warfare that preceded it. Months before his army arrived, Subutai had begun to invade the European mind, his eyes spreading carefully crafted rumors about invulnerability Mongol, while refugees from conquered territories, brings a story of unprecedented destruction. Before by the time the Mongol troops actually showed up, many European forces were already demoralized and ready to escape. Battle of Mohi perfectly exemplifies the tactical genius of Subutai. Faced the Hungarian troops, 65,000 who were stationed behind strong fortifications. Any conventional general would outflank or seek a different route. Subutai did neither. Instead, he performed a maneuver complex that involves feigning retreat, attracted the Hungarians out of their fortifications, then surrounded them with powers they never saw coming. The Hungarian forces were completely destroyed. Over 50,000 people were killed in a single day, while Mongol losses numbered in the hundreds. Fourth king of Hungary barely escaped with his life, and Hungary, as an independent kingdom, effectively stopped. Something that makes this one even more incredible is that Subutai was 60 years old at the time, age when most fighters had long since retired, and yet he led a cavalry charge and personally led a reconnaissance mission with the energy of a man and a half. Innovation. Subutai in military technology is just as revolutionary. He is among the first general to effectively integrate siege engine with cavalry. Mobile creates an army that can move with lightning speed and reduce fortified cities. His engineers developed a portable bridge, which allowed the Mongols to cross the river that Europeans thought is a barrier that cannot be crossed. He pioneered the use of war, psychological on an industrial scale, using terror as a strategic weapon to break the enemy's resistance before the fighting started. Maybe the most important, Subutai understand logistics in a way that will not be matched until the modern era. His forces could operate thousands of miles from their supply base because he has revolutionized the whole concept of military supply. Every Mongol warrior bring everything you need for an extended campaign, while troops as a whole could live off the land, more efficient than any power in history. When Subutai died in 1248, at the age of 73, he personally has led a campaign who conquered more territory from Alexander the Great, Caesar, and Napoleon combined. He never loses in a single major battle. In over 60 years, war and its tactical innovations influenced military thinking for centuries to come. Imperium Mongol, that he helped create, lasted more than 150 years and facilitate trade and exchange cultures across the continent of Eurasia. But probably the greatest legacy of Subutai is the evidence that he provided. That military genius was not born. It was forged through experience, innovation, and absolute denial to accept conventional limitations. The 4th of January, Iker revolutionary, one-eyed. Imagine this. A 1420 and the most powerful military force. In Europe, medieval times were marching towards the small town. Bohemia, confident of an easy victory, Holy Roman Empire had assembled a crusader army, more than 100,000 German knight in shiny armor, Hungarian newspaper, and papal mercenaries, who was blessed by the Pope himself. Their target was a group of Czech farmers, artisans, and nobles, small, led by former one-eyed mercenaries, which is considered mostly European. As a perverted madman, what happens next would revolutionize warfare forever and prove that the military genius can emerge from the most unlikely places. That one-eyed commander was Schoenecker, and he will show that everything medieval Europe thought about the war completely wrong. But Ike's path to military immortality started in tragedy and the religious revolution. Born around 1360, in a Bohemian minor nobleman, Ike spent 2020 initially as a mercenary, fought in various conflicts across Europe. Middle, he lost his left eye in battle, earned him the nickname of the One Eye, but this defect only seemed to sharpen his tactical vision. Everything changed in 1415, when Jan Hus, great Czech religious reformer, burned at the stake by the Catholic Church. Despite the promise of safe protection, Hus' execution sparked outrage throughout Bohemia, but for Ike, it became a personal crusade that will determine the rest of his life. The Hussite movement wasn't just about religious reform. It was a complete rejection of the feudal system, which makes farmers Czech in poverty, while German royalty and Catholic clergy get rich from their work. When Hussite declared independence from the Holy Roman Empire and Catholic Church, they know they would face power combined of Europe's greatest powers. Medieval times, that they don't know is that they found the perfect general to lead the fight. Impossible them. Ike understands something that his enemies don't understand. In war, innovation beats tradition every time, while his opponent relies on attacks, heavy cavalry, and individual battle prowess. Ike revolutionized military tactics by changing farmers' tools into a weapon of war. His most famous innovation was the chariot of war, basically mobile fortress that can be quickly assembled into a defensive formation. This isn't just a cart with steel plates. They were advanced military machines, which was equipped with a small cannon, crossbow, and the firing port that allowed defenders raining death on cavalry that attacked. But the true genius of Ike's chariot, not his defensive ability, it was his mobility. Unlike a traditional fortress, this mobile fortress could quickly be repositioned to utilize the terrain, creates a choke point, or execute a tactical withdrawal. It could basically have found the first armored fighting vehicle centuries before anyone else. Even imagining things like that, his tactical innovation far beyond technology, Ike was one of the first generals in history Europe that effectively incorporates different types of infantry troops, artillery, cavalry, and engineers into a coordinated combined arms tactic. He pioneered the use of early firearms in European warfare, training his peasant soldiers to use primitive hand cannons and rifles, beginning with a devastating effectiveness. The most important, he understands psychological warfare better than any commander in his day. View of the war chariot. Ike rolled across the battlefield filled with weapons and seemingly unstoppable, has a profound psychological impact on enemy forces. Many battles were won before they even started because the opposing force escaped, then faced the terrifying Hussite war machine. Ike's masterpiece comes at the Battle of Soudemers in 1420. He faced the first major crusade against Hussite imperial army, exceeded his army by more than 301, and including some of the best heavy cavalry in Europe. Conventional general, anywhere will find a defensive position and hope to survive attacks. Ike does the opposite. He used his war chariot to create a mobile fortress that can go forward while maintaining defensive power. When the Imperial cavalry attacked, were expecting to deploy hordes of farmers. They instead hit a wall of steel and gunpowder that is impenetrable. The psychological shock was devastating. This shouldn't be an army. They should have been victims. In a few hours, the whole crusade is on the run, leaving thousands of people dead and get hurt. Victory in Sudemer sent shockwaves across Europe. How farmers can beat German chivalry flowers. How a one-eyed pervert could defeat the greatest military minds of the era. The answer is simple. Ika has rediscovered the war itself. But Sudemers are just the beginning. For the next 4 years, Ika will face 4 separate crusades. Each one is bigger and more determined than the last. Every time, innovation, tactical, and his psychological warfare proved against superior. Traditional medieval military doctrine of I is at in 1420. He showed the offensive potential of his war chariot by using them to storm castles, which is heavily fortified. In Coudenhora, in 1421 he showed how the mobile castle could be used to control the entire battlefield. In Max Brott, in 1422 he proved that his tactics worked, even when facing the most elite troops in Europe. Who made the achievement? The more incredible Ika is that he accomplished all this while gradually losing his eyesight. In 1421 he was completely blind, but he continued to lead his troops with brilliance, the same tactical, which makes him legendary. His officer would describe the battlefield to him in detail, and he will issue commands with precision, such a way so many believe he can still see. When John Ika died of plague in 1424, he has never lost a single battle. Throughout his career as Commander Hussad, his tactical innovation influenced military thinking for centuries, and his war chariot was the direct predecessor of modern armored vehicles. But probably the most important proof that military genius isn't about noble birth or formal training. It was about the ability to see possibilities that others missed and the courage to implement. Revolutionary eye. In the face of overwhelming opposition, Hussad movement that he was militarily in charge continued for another decade after his death, and his tactical legacy lives on in the Gustavus team, Dalvis Napoleon, and countless other military innovators. 5 cunts. The Roman Africans who defeated Hannibal at the darkest hour of Roman history, when the greatest military minds of the ancient world brought the mighty republic to its knees. A young man dared to what was never tried. Any Roman general. That year was to 16 BC, and Hannibal Barca just hit the impossible. At the battle, Kenny really destroyed the team. Roman 80,000 people in what historians still consider military as the most perfect tactical victory that has ever been recorded. Rome in a panic. His allied allies defected, and many believe the end of the Republic is near. Into this desperate situation, Malenka Publius Cornelius Scipio, only 24 years old, that will prove that sometimes students can go beyond even the greatest teacher. But the Scipio road to eternity started with a personal tragedy and a burning desire for revenge. At the Battle of Taissins in 218 BC, when Scipio was just 18, he has watched helplessly as Hannibal's cavalry slaughtered Roman troops and almost killed his own father. Consul Publius Cornelius Scipio the Old, I don't drink time, had personally saved his father's life that day, but the humiliation of defeat burned his soul. 2 years later, both his father and his uncle killed fighting Hannibal's forces in Spain. Their heads were sent to Carthage as trophies for most of the Roman youth. Such a loss would mean the end of a military career and their political ambitions for their Scipios to fuel. For one of the most incredible comebacks in military history, who made Scipio different than every other Roman general of his day? Not just his tactical brilliance, but its revolutionary willingness to learn from his enemies' enemies, while other Roman commanders stubbornly sticking to traditional tactics that Hannibal has repeatedly destroyed. Scipio studied the Carthaginian method with the intensity of a scholar. He analyzes every single battle, every maneuver, every psychological trick that has made Hannibal seems invincible. Then, he did something that had never happened previously in Roman military culture. He's adapting those tactical and make it his own. Scipio's first test coming in Spain, where by the age of 25, he was given command of the Roman forces with orders to prevent Carthaginian reinforcements reached Hannibal in Italy. What happens next shocked the ancient world over careful and defensive strategies that the Roman tradition demands. Scipio launches a lightning strike on New Carthage. Carthage in Spain. The city was considered impregnable, protected by the ocean on one side and a massive fortress on the other. Scipio's solution is pure genius. He has learned the ups and downs and discover that at low tide, lagoon that protects the north wall of the city to be shallow enough for the army to cross over, while the Carthaginians focus on sustaining a clear frontal assault. Scipio's team crossed the lagoon and climbed over the unguarded northern wall. Carthage just fell in one day, and with her, Carthage's control over Spain began to crumble. But Scipio's masterpiece yet to come. In the Battle of Ilipa in 206 BC, he faced the Carthaginians, which is led by Hasdrubal Disco, one of Hannibal's most capable lieutenants. The power of Carthage was greater, more experienced, and are placed in advantageous terrain. Conventional Roman general anywhere would avoid fighting or receive an expensive frontal attack. Scipio does neither. On the contrary, he executed such a brilliant tactical maneuver so that it is still studied in the military academy. He set his army in a formation that was not conventional, putting its weakest troops in the center and the strongest on the wing. Then as the fighting started, he ordered his center to go forward slowly while its wings move with double speed. The result is double packing, the same tactics that Hannibal used to destroy the Romans in Cannae. Now behind fighting the Carthaginians themselves, the psychological impact was devastating. Hasdrubal's special forces, seeing their own tactics used, fight them with greater skill, broke and ran away in a panic. Spain was lost to Carthage forever, but the biggest challenge, Scipio is still in front. In 244 BC, he convinced the Roman Senate to let her did what the Roman didn't dare try. Invaded Africa and invaded Carthage himself. His strategy is daring beyond belief. Instead of continuing the defensive war in Italy, Scipio will force Hannibal back home by threatening the heart of Carthage, landing in North Africa. With only 30,000 people, the Pio immediately began to show tactical innovation. That will make him legendary. He forged an alliance with the Cavallino commander of the Meteor, gives him a mobile attacking force, which has always been Rome's weakness. He pioneered a new siege technique, which allows it, capturing fortified cities at an unprecedented speed. The most important, he continued his psychological warfare, spread its reputation of invincibility throughout northern Africa. The climax comes at the Battle of the Jammer in 200 BC, where Scipio ended up facing Hannibal himself. In single combat between two of the greatest generals of their time, Hannibal brought everything he had. Veteran infantry from his Italian campaign, Numidias, and 80 war elephants that was designed to break up the present Roman formation. Scipio is a masterclass in tactical adaptation. He had studied Hannibal's use of elephants and developed actions. A special reply creates a corridor in its formation, which allows the huge beast attack with harmless. Through his line of his secularimetry neutralized cavalry superiority, Hannibal, while his infantry, trained in flexible tactics rather than rigid formations, proved superior even to veterans of Hannibal. Battle that followed is the main test of two military geniuses, and when the dust settles, Hannibal has suffered the first defeat, and the Second Punic War ended, and the survival of Rome was assured. Scipio Africanus, back to Rome as the greatest hero in Republican history, have achieved what many think is impossible. He had defeated the invincible Hannibal. His tactical innovation influenced Roman military doctrine for centuries, and its strategic vision, bringing the war to the enemy's homeland, became the cornerstone of the Roman Empire's policy. But perhaps the Pio's greatest achievement was proof that the military genius is not about following tradition, but about having the courage to innovate. When innovation is the only road to victory. When Scipio died in 183 BC, he never loses. In the Great Battle, and his legacy as the man who saved Rome from the threat. His greatest save for all times, Six Belli, the last Roman. Imagine the year 533 meters, when the Roman Empire, that was once mighty, has been reduction, become a shadow of his past glory, control no more than Constantinople, and several areas scattered around the Mediterranean. The Western Roman Empire had collapsed decades earlier. His lands were divided between the barbarian kingdoms that seemed to be getting stronger with each passing year. Most people believe that the Roman age of greatness has ended forever, that the empire that once ruled the world, known, destined to get in the dustbin of history, then came a man who would prove that all of them, one of such a brilliant general, so that he would reconquer half Mediterranean with a smaller team than used barbarians to attack villages. His name is Flavius Belisarius, and he will soon demonstrate that military geniuses can overcome any opportunity, no matter how impossible it seems. But the rise of Belisarius to legendary status began under the most unlikely circumstances. Born around 505 meters in a small village in Tressier, she comes from a simple family, without noble connections or inheritance of wealth. In the rigid class system of the Roman Empire, the end of people like Belisarius should have stayed a farmer, or at most, ordinary soldiers. What changed everything is an extraordinary talent for going to war, which attracted the attention of Emperor Justinianus, one of the most ambitious rulers in history. Justinian Byzantium, have a dream, which most people perceive as insanity, restored the Roman Empire ancient glory by conquering back the lost western territories. Obstacles seem insurmountable. Vandal Kingdom, controlling North Africa and the sea route, Mediterranean. The Ostrogothic Empire dominated Italy, and various other barbarian tribes ruled Spain and slaying each. This kingdom has an even bigger army than anything Byzantium can mobilize, and they have decades of experience, fought against the Roman forces. But Justinian, see something in yourself. Missed young Belisarius, others tactical minds that can turn a loss be an advantage and achieve victory through brilliance than brute force. Belisarius' first test came up against the Sasanian Empire in the east, where he demonstrated groundbreaking tactics that would make him legendary. At the Battle of Blood in 530 meters, faced the Persian army, twice the size of his own army. Belisarius revolutionized Byzantium's military doctrine. Instead of a frontal attack, traditional expected Persian, he created a defensive formation with hidden backup and a carefully planned counterattack. When the Persian heavy cavalry attacked, expecting to scatter the Byzantine army, the smaller one, they instead found themselves trapped in a murder field, which is carefully orchestrated. Result was the defeat of the Persians, which destroys. That sent shockwaves throughout the ancient world. How could small Byzantium army crush the army? Elites from the mighty Sasanian Empire. The answer lies in the revolutionary understanding Belisarius about weapon-combined tactics and psychological warfare. But his greatest victory is yet to come. In the year 533 meters, Justinian ordered Belerius to do the impossible, reconquered North Africa from the kingdom of Vandal. With only 15,000 people, the Vandal has controlled the region for over a century, built a strong navy, and founded fortified cities throughout the region. Their king, Gelimer, led over 50,000 soldiers and controlled the richest provinces from the former Western Empire. Annalisis Rational. Anything shows that the expedition seriously doomed to fail. What happens next became one of the most brilliant campaigns in military history by seriously understand that he couldn't win through conventional warfare. The team is too small. Instead, he had to rely on speed, shock, and psychological impact of an unexpected victory landed near the cottage, the former capital of the Vandal Kingdom. Belerius immediately began demonstrating innovation tactical that would define his career. He used his little cavalry squad, not for frontal assault, but for a quick recon and hit and run attack, which keeps the enemy off balance. His infantry, trained in flexible formations rather than rigid lines, can adapt to battlefield situations. What is most important? He understands the power of propaganda and psychological battle warfare. At the Chimham, Belisarius faces the main force of Vandals in what was supposed to be a fight. Without hope, Gelimer has positioned its troops to encircle a small Byzantium army, sure that the superior amount of will guarantee victory. But Belisarius has carefully studied the terrain and noticed something the Vandal missed: a series of hills that can be used to break up their formation. Using these natural obstacles, he divided the Vandal army into smaller segments, which can be defeated individually. The psychological impact was devastating. Their seemingly invincible army broken down and dissolved. Many Vandal soldiers just escaped from the battlefield. In a few months, the entire Vandal kingdom has collapsed, and North Africa was once again under Roman control. But the Belisarius masterpiece came in Italy, where he faced challenges, which is even bigger. The Ostrogoth kingdom is larger, more militarily sophisticated, and led by generals capable of, who have learned from the Vandals' defeat. Boundary mode led over 100,000 soldiers and control fortified cities all over the Italian peninsula. Against these massive forces, Belisarius can mobilize probably 20,000 people. The chances are so overwhelming, so that even Justinian began to doubt the wisdom of Italian campaign. But Belisarius has developed a new tactic that, designed specifically for war, siege, and urban combat. His engineer pioneered a new siege technique that can reduce fortified cities within weeks, then months. His cavalry units were trained in rapid deployment and can attack multiple targets simultaneously. The most important, he has mastered the art. Change the enemy's strength be a weakness. On the siege of Rome in 537 meters, Belisarius demonstrated tactical genius that military historians still study today. Faced a Gothic army of 150,000 men, he changed the Eternal City itself, being a fortress, using the ancient walls and its strategic position to neutralize the numerical advantage of Gothic. For over a year, he defended Rome against impossible odds, launched a surprise attack that got not balanced, while gradually eroding their morale. When help finally arrived, Gothic forces are so demoralized so that they just melt away. Psychological impact of maintaining the Rome, symbolic heart of the empire, echoes across the Mediterranean world. Belisarius has proved that the Roman Empire didn't die, that with the right leadership, it can still achieve the impossible. At the time of his last campaign, Belisarius had reconquered North Africa, mostly Italian, and parts of Spain, restored control of the Roman over the territories that have been lost for over a century. He never loses in the great battle, despite consistently to face the enemy with superior numbers and resources. His tactical innovations influenced military thinking for centuries, and his campaign be a textbook example of how brilliant leadership can overcome seemingly impossible odds. When Belisarius died in 565 meters, he had grabbed a place among the commanders, the greatest military in history. He has proved that the Roman age of greatness was not over, that with courage, innovation, and tactical brilliance, even the most desperate situations can be turned into victory. 7. Yes, Anson, the admiral who saved career. Imagine this, 1992, and the most powerful military force in East Asia are preparing to conquer the world. Japanese, who united under a brilliant warlord, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, have assembled an invasion fleet, more than 1,500 ships, which carried 200,000 soldiers, samurai with advanced combat experience. Their target is Korea, that they were planning as a stepping stone towards the grand prize, conquest of the Chinese Ming dynasty and dominance over all of Asia. The Korean Navy in reverse consists of fewer than 100 ships that was manned by sailors who have never experienced a major battle. On paper, this is supposed to be the most unbalanced sea in history, but This was the stage for one of the comebacks, the largest military ever recorded, that was orchestrated by a man that would prove that tactical genius can overcome all obstacles. His name is Sun, and he will show that sometimes one brilliant mind can change the course of history itself. Yet Sun's journey to naval immortality, not at all smooth. Born in 1545 to a small noble family, he initially pursued a military career on land, served as a cavalry officer on the northern border of Korea. His early career was characterized by competence, but not brilliance. He is a solid and reliable officer who follows orders and protects his men. That changed everything. Was a series of political machinations ruined his life. Falsely accused of desertion by an envious rival, Sun stripped of his rank, tortured and demoted to regular soldiers. For most people, such humiliation would mean the end of their military ambitions. For Sun, this becomes a forging smelting vessel, one of the greatest naval minds in history. When the Japanese invasion began in 1592, the Korean situation is very desperate. Beyond imagination, Japan has perfected the art of warfare through decades of civil conflict, created soldiers that move with precision like a clock, and fight with fanatical determination. Their initial attack was devastating. In a matter of weeks, they have taken Seoul, Korean capital, and fast forward towards the Chinese border. Korean ground forces, who were unprepared for the intensity of Japanese warfare, collapsed in front of the samurai attack. It seems that Korean independence was destined to be destroyed, and Hideyoshi's dream of the conquest of Asia will become a reality. But there was one element that Japan overlooked: sea domination. In their rush to achieve a quick victory on land, they underestimated the importance of naval warfare. In a fully dependent campaign on a supply line that spans hundreds of miles across the ocean, this omission would prove to be their fatal mistake. Yi Sun-shin, who was just appointed naval commander, despite the disgrace before, immediately realized that Korea's only hope lies in cutting off the Japanese supply lines. And yet he faces seemingly impossible obstacles. The Japanese fleet was bigger, more experienced, and equipped with superior firearms that Sun has. That his enemies don't, is something far more precious. Of the amount of revolutionary tactical thinking and a deep understanding of Korean waters. The first innovation is the famous turtle ship technology, or Geobukian, which became the world's first armored battleship. These ships were covered with iron plates and nails, made him almost immune to Japanese boarding tactics while being armed with cannons that can destroy enemy formations. But the tortoise ship is just one element of a revolutionary approach. Yi Sun-shin against naval warfare. He pioneered the use of coordinated fleet tactics, converting a smaller force into precision instruments that can strike at the right time and place. The most important, he understands psychological warfare better than any admiral in his day. The first big win, Yi Sun-shin, came at the Battle of Okpo in 1992, where he demonstrated the tactical principles that will make him legendary. Instead of engaging the Japanese fleet in traditional line battles, he uses complex geography, the Korean coastline to its advantage, lured Japanese ships into the narrow strait where their superior numbers doesn't mean anything. He then released the turtle ship in attack, which made enemy fleets run away in a panic. The psychological impact is huge. For the first time since the invasion began, the Japanese forces suffered heavy losses. But Yi Sun-shin's masterpiece came at the Battle of Hansan Island in 1590, to where he faced a Japanese fleet, more than 70 ships, with only 56 of his own ships. Conventional admiral anywhere would avoid fighting or accept an expensive frontal fight. Sun does neither. On the contrary, he did what military historians call as one of the Navy's most brilliant maneuvers that ever. In the stork wing formation concept, he arranging his ships in the shape of a crescent moon, with a turtle ship in the middle and the fastest ship on the wing. As the Japanese fleet advanced in traditional formation, they expect other conventional combat Yasunshin team suddenly spread like giant crane wings. The result is a perfect siege that trapped the entire Japanese fleet within a slaughter zone. In a matter of hours, more than 60 Japanese ships have sunk or arrested, while Yasunshin didn't lose a single ship. Battle of Hansen Island marked the turning point of the entire war. With their supply lines cut off and their naval superiority was destroyed, Japanese ground forces found themselves isolated and getting desperate. That started as a march, confidently heading towards the conquest of China, become a desperate struggle for survival. But the greatest test is Sun Tsun is still coming. In 1997, political enemies at the Korean managed to capture and torture him on charges of false treason. His successor immediately took the Korean fleet into a devastating battle that resulted in the destruction pretty much the entire navy. When Yasunshin was finally restored to command, he found himself with only 13 ships. Face a renewed Japanese invasion force, more than 300 ships. The opportunities are overwhelming, so that his own officer pleaded with him to leave the sea and retreat inland. Responsai Sun Shin became one of the most famous quotes in Korean history. I still have 13 ships left, and I'm still alive. What happened next was Naengmyeon battle in 1597. Probably the most impossible naval victory in recorded history. Using his intimate knowledge of currents, the tides, and the bottom stones, Sun Tsun positioned its small fleet in the narrow strait, where Japan's numerical advantage means nothing. As the large enemy fleet advances, confident of easy victory, Eurasian waiting for the perfect moment when the tide would turn. Then, with timings bordering on supernatural, she launched her attack right when the tide turned to send Japanese ships crashing into each other in total chaos. At the end of the battle, more than 30 Japanese ships have been destroyed, while the Shin-Yuri fleet remains intact. Its psychological impact. Destroy. How is it possible? 13 Korean ships beat the fleet 25 times bigger. The answer lies in the perfect combination. Yasunshin between tactical genius, technological innovation, and psychological warfare. When Yasunshin died in 1598, during the final battle of the war, he never loses in one naval engagement. His victory had saved Korea from conquest, Japanese, and prevented Hideyoshi's dream of Asian domination come true. But perhaps the most important is Sun Tsun proves that the military genius isn't about having superior resources. It's about using whatever you have with maximum effectiveness and never accept that victory is impossible. 8. Gonzalo D.C. Ardo-BA, the great captain in the last 2013 of the 15th European warfare, will undergo the most dramatic transformation in military history. For over 1,000 years, heavy armored knight on horseback has dominated the battlefield from England to the Holy Land. Their thundering attacks determine the fate of kingdoms and empires. But a revolution is coming, and would be led by a Spanish nobleman that will prove that the age of chivalry is ending and a new era of professional warfare is beginning. His name is Gonzalo Fan, the Andes, known in history as El Gran Claus and Great Captain, and he would show that military genius can completely recreating the art of war itself. Yet the Gonzalo road to revolutionary majesty started in the most traditional way. Born around 1453 from among the nobility and Aluja small, he grew up during the last stages of Reconquista Christian campaign for centuries to take back Spain of Muslim power. Military experience originally came from fighting against the Mernation of Granada, where he learns the brutal realities of warfare, siege, and the importance of infantry disciplined in the mountain terrain. This early campaign teach it something that would define his entire career. Victory does not belong to soldiers, the bravest or most noble, but for those who can adapt their tactics according to the specific demands of each battlefield. When the Quista Rekan ended in 1492, with the fall of Granada, most of the Spanish nobles considered their military careers have ended. Yet Gonzalo understood that Spain's destiny located outside the Iberian Peninsula, and that skills learned while fighting the Moor will soon be needed on a much bigger stage. That stage is Italy. where the great powers of Europe would start a series of conflicts which will reshape the political map of the continent. In 1495, King Ferdinand of Aragon ordered Gonzalo to lead a Spanish expedition to southern Italy, whereas the French team recently had conquered the Kingdom of Naples. The mission seemed simple: drove out the French and restored Spanish influence in the region. That actually happened would revolutionize European warfare forever. Gonzalo immediately realized that traditional Spanish tactics would be futile against a French army. France has perfected the art of warfare. Heavy cavalry deployed the best knights in Europe, which was backed by Swiss spear warriors, whose disciplinary formation had dominated the battlefields of Europe for decades. Against these elite forces, Gonzalo can only deploy maybe 8,000 people, many of them is an inexperienced soldier who had never fought outside of Spain. Conventional general anywhere would avoid fighting or accept a defensive strategy. Gonzalo do something that's never happened before. He completely reinvented military tactics. His first innovation was the creation of a tercia, revolutionary infantry that combines the spear warrior, sword warrior, and archer shooters into one flexible unit, not like the rigid Swiss Phalanx, who can only fight in one formation. Tertians can adapt to battlefield situations, any switch between offensive and defensive roles as required. And yet the true genius of the Gonzalo system, not just tactical, but the technological. He was one of the first generals who fully understood the potential of gunpowder weapons, integrating early firearms into its formation with devastating effectiveness. His arquebus gunners weren't just support troops. They're the core of its tactical system, able to destroy enemy formations before soldiers' spear and his sword went in to kill. The first big test Gonzalo came on the Battle of Cerignola in 153, where he faced down soldiers. France is led by Duke of Nemours, one of the best military minds in Europe. The French army is bigger, more experienced, and including the elite Swiss Guard, who have never been defeated in open combat. Duke of Nemours, very confident of victory, until he reportedly said to his men that they were going to have dinner at the Spanish camp. That night that happened next shocked the military world. Instead of facing the French attack directly, Gonzalo positioned his troops behind a series of fortifications and ditches that he had built overnight. When French heavy cavalry charged thunderously, expecting to disperse the Spanish infantry, instead, they crashed into the killing field, which has been carefully prepared. Arquebus shooter Gonzalo, which is protected by their fortifications, fired a devastating shot into the night that attacked, while his spear warriors, standing firm against every breakthrough attempt. The psychological impact is huge. For the first time in memory, French chivalry flower been stopped cold by ordinary foot soldiers. But the real surprise comes when Gonzalo launches its counterattack. Fourie-Mastirian moves with a precision that makes the observers all swept forward and completely destroyed the French army. That demoralization, Duke of Nemours-Turbino, along with most of his senior officers, and French forces in southern Italy were crushed. Battle Cerignola marks the end of the War of the Century and the beginning of the modern military era. Gonzalo has proven that infantry, who is disciplined with firearms, can beat the best heavy cavalry in Europe. Fundamentally changed the way war would be fought over the next 3 centuries. But his masterpiece, still to come, at the Battle of Galiano in 153, Gonzalo faces greater challenges. The new French army, bigger and more determined than ever, has invaded Italy under the command of Marshal Delapierre, who has studied defeat in the Cerignola and developed tactics, a new one specifically designed to counteract. Spanish France have learned to use their own firearms more effective and has created a new formation that supposedly can neutralize the advantage of Tessio. For months and months, the two armies faced each other across the Gliano-Gari River. No one was able to obtain decisive advantage. France held a strong defensive position and apparently content to wait for Spanish supplies to run out. Conventional generals would step down or receive an expensive frontal attack. Gonzalo chose the third option, who demonstrated his tactical genius at its peak. On a cold December night, he secretly moved his entire army, crossed the river at an unexpected point, using improvised boats and bridges that its engineers have built in complete silence at dawn. Spanish army were in a position to attack the French encampment from the same direction. Unexpected. His psychological shock devastated France. Count, they're safely behind their river barriers, only to wake up with a Spanish Teshio formation forward on their wings. Battle that followed was a total defeat. French troops were caught off guard, not being able to form a proper line of defense. Systematically destroyed by disciplined Gonzalo infantry, Marshal of her died in calfskins, along with most of its soldiers, and the French dream for the conquest of Italy, ending forever. Victory in Galiano sets Gonzalo as the greatest military mind of his generation. Confirm that the military innovation Spain has been fundamentally transformed European warfare, its tertian system into standard infantry formations. Over the next 2 centuries, imitated by every major European army, its integration between firearms and weapons, traditional created templates, to early modern military tactics, the most important, the emphasis on training and discipline, professional over noble birth, revolutionized military culture all over Europe. When Gonzalo Desi Hardoba died in 1551, he has never lost a major battle and had established Spain as a military power dominant in Europe. His tactical innovations influenced military thinking until the gunpowder era, and his professional approach to warfare became the foundation for modern military doctrine. Yet probably Gonzalo's greatest achievement is to prove that the military genius is not about preserving tradition. It's about having a vision to see when tradition should be abandoned and the courage to create something completely new. Heritage cover. The Undefeated. As we reach the end of the journey through the lives of 8 generals, invincible in history, one question remains. What makes these people completely different of thousands of commanders, another military that have marched across the pages of history? The answer is not expected. Most people, it's not a superior amount. In fact, most of these generals consistently fought against incredible obstacles. It's not better equipment. Many of them achieved the greatest victory, them with inferior weapons and technology. That's not even noble birth or formal military training. Some come from backgrounds, simple back, and learn war through the bitter experience. Then academy instruction. Who united Khalid ibn Walid, Alexander Agung Subutai, Jenica Kipio, Afurikanis Kaz and Gonzalo Desi Hardoba is something far more rare and precious. The ability to see warfare, not as a set of rigid rules, but as an endless series of problems that require creative solutions. Each of these men face a moment when conventional wisdom says victory is unlikely. Khalid faced the mighty Byzantine Empire with a force half its size and changed the battle. Yarmouk becomes a masterclass in tactical innovation. Alexander stared at the Persian Empire, the greatest military force the world has ever seen, and revolutionized warfare through pure courage and tactical brilliance. Subutai, coordinate military campaigns on several continents simultaneously, achieve a level of strategic thinking that wouldn't be matched until the modern era. Ken Ika, turning farmers into a force, an unstoppable military that scared the greatest knights in Europe. The Pio studied his greatest enemy so thorough, so he changed tactics. Hannibal himself fought it at the plural battle. Belisarius reconquered half the Mediterranean with a smaller team, then is used to control individual cities. Eurasian saved the whole nation with only 13 ships against a fleet 25 times bigger. Gonzalo Desi Hardoba reinvented infantry warfare and ended the age of heavy cavalry domination forever. But maybe the most important lesson of these 8 legends was not at all about military tactics. It's about the power of refusing to accept the boundaries. Every one of these generals faced a situation where retreat, surrender, or compromise seemed like the only rational choice. Every single one of them chose to find way forward that no one else can see. They understand that true leadership is not about following an established pattern. It was about having a vision to create a new. When the old ones no longer work, this principle extends far beyond the battlefield. In business, art, science, and every other human endeavor, the biggest breakthrough came from there. Who refused to accept that something is maybe just because it's never been done before. 8 generals that we learn not only wins battles, them expands the definition of what victory looks like. They prove that with creativity, sufficient determination, and tactical thinking, even the most desperate situations, it can be turned into victory. Their legacy lives on, not only in military academies and history books, but in every moment when someone chooses innovation, from tradition, courage over caution, and the possibility from limitations. The next time you face challenges that seem insurmountable, remember the lessons of the 8 undefeated generals. Victory is not about having the best resources or the most favorable circumstances. It's about having wisdom to see opportunities that others have missed, the courage to act on them when the right moment, in the world that often tells us to accept our limits. These 8 men remind us that the only true limit is the one we place on our own imagination. Their battles may end, but their biggest victory proves that the impossible is just another problem waiting for the right solution. Continue to inspire us. Today, 8 generals that never loses teaches us that defeat isn't about losing a battle. Real defeat is accept that victory is impossible before you even try to find a way to win.